Greg Hardy, who just got signed by the Cowboys, but sat out most of last year because he was involved in a domestic violence case, which is prevalent in the National Football League and dominated a lot of the news last season. But what's kind of overlooked in all this, he's slapping his girlfriend around. He was found guilty by a judge, and then he had the right under Carolina law to take it to a jury trial. And the case was dropped because she wouldn't testify against him. She changed her mind. But in any case, as part of this, he threw her on a couch with loaded shotguns and assault weapons on the couch. Now, is this what the Founding Fathers had in mind? That Greg Hardy should be armed to the teeth? That private citizens should be able to purchase cop-killer, armor-piercing bullets?
Right.
That you should be able to have an AK-47? Right. I mean, carry it to its logical conclusion. If you're fearful of a tyrannical government taking away your rights as a citizen, then you ought to have a bazooka. You ought to have a tank. You ought to be able to have nuclear weapons if you can get them before ISIS can get their hands on them.
Well, you mentioned ISIS. Let me tie it all together, Bob. You mentioned ISIS. You mentioned slapping your girlfriend around, and I mentioned perspective, and in the monologue. And you know, slapping your woman around in Muslim countries is legal, if not mandatory. Don't you think political correctness is kind of out of hand, especially when the president says things like,
yes,
we can't use the phrase Islamic extremism, we can only say violent extremism? Yeah.
I applaud you. You and I have spoken about it privately. Right. You need people on the left to call this bullshit out, all right? And I'm glad to be back on HBO. Yeah. You can say bullshit. Yeah. All right? Just as you need people on the right to call conservative bullshit out. There are legitimate conservative positions, okay? I often find myself saying, that's a good point that George Will made. That's a good point that Rich Lowry made. It may not be the entire thing. It's a conservative point, but there's some truth in it. The DOJ report, to listen to Fox News, the only thing that was in it was that Darren Wilson was justified in shooting Michael Brown. Fair enough. To listen to MSNBC, the only thing that was in it was that there was systemic racism in the Ferguson Police Department. Right. Also fair enough. And other places, Cleveland, we saw something in Fort Lauderdale just recently came out. We know that this is true to a certain extent across the country. But why can't people with common sense hold two truths in their head at the same time and realize that what we want here is common sense, rather than just my tribe and your tribe,
common sense
left and right.
is not common, unfortunately.
No,
not
no.
anymore.